The Liberty Weekly Podcast, Episode 3.
In the history of the United States, war has generally been the main occasion for the often permanent intensification of the power of the state over society. The American government has consistently pursued a goal and a policy of world domination. In the name of combating aggression everywhere, of being the world's policeman, it has itself become a great and continuing aggressor. War has always been the occasion of a great and usually permanent acceleration and intensification of state power over society. It is in war that the state really comes into its own, swelling in power, in number, in pride, in absolute dominion over the economy and the society. For the root myth that enables the state to wax fat off war is the canard that war is a defense by the state of its subjects. The facts, however, are precisely the reverse. In war, therefore, the state frantically mobilizes its subjects to fight for it against another state, under the pretext that it is fighting to defend them.
Okay, so for this episode of the Liberty Weekly Podcast, we're going to be talking about war and how war does not benefit anyone and war does not kickstart the economy.
In nearly all way, shape, and form, it is a bad thing.
It is a bad thing. It is mass murder.
Yeah, war is a racket. War is mass murder.
But unfortunately, war is the health of the state.
Yes, indeed.
And I'm going to find out right now who said that.
It was a general, or I know war is a racket.
Randolph Bourne. Yeah. War is a racket was said by a general, but war is the health of the state. So, yeah, I mean, I wrote a piece on Thought Crime Thursdays. One of my first pieces was about how when you play Rome Total War or any of those games, the real-time grand strategy games, I mean, the only way to win is to conquer territories.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole premise of it. And I was...
You're like, but I don't want to... Like, it's sort of funny, like, how... This is something I've thought about, is, like, how do you create, like, a 4X game, but you win as a libertarian, and you're like, you just don't play.
You don't.
Like,
you just don't play.
Like, what would you do? You'd just be like... Oh yeah, so we have the state here, and we're just gonna hit the never do anything button, and then we'll just get the best economy.
It'd be like, can I play as an entrepreneur?
Yeah. No.
Can I play Rome Total War as like a sword maker? No, not a sword maker, or a glass jug maker or something. I'm gonna conquer Europe by providing people with products,
providing people with superior pots.
Yes.
of the best quality. No, with games like that, if you look at I haven't played Civilization that much, but from what I know of it, I know that the war related objectives are all great public works monuments, I'm pretty sure,
and wonders. Wonders. Yeah. There's the space race option. Mm-hmm. I think there's the wonders you can build, and then there's like a diplomatic solution, which I assume is conglomerating into a world government.
Yeah, this is the diplomatic solution, aka globalism.
Yeah, globalism. and you can't win for losing.
Yeah.
But to get back to war. Well, I was listening to a Murray Rothbard lecture the other day, which I'll have to put in the show notes links if I can find it. But he was talking about America's two just wars, and guess which ones?
Wasn't it War of 1812 and Revolutionary War?
Yeah, close.
Okay,
not 1812 was awful.
Okay,
but it was the Revolution and it was the War for Southern Secession. The war to prevent Southern Secession.
He was saying that was a just war?
Yeah, that the Civil War, from the point of view of the Confederates, was the only just.
Yes.
So the only two just wars, was the American Revolution. And ironically enough, I had been doing some looking into the War of 1812 for my nullification paper.
Yeah.
And it was Madison. They were calling it Mr. Madison's War.
Yeah.
Mr. Madison, the one who wrote nullification, and was saying, what was Madison's quote is...
Didn't DC get burned down?
Yeah. Yep. Madison's quote about war, and this had to do, he said this around the time of the Alien and Sedition Acts. He said to Thomas Jefferson, "The loss of liberty at home is to be charged to the provisions against danger, real or imagined, from abroad." And then as soon as James Madison becomes president, he pushes this war against Great Britain.
It's funny. It seems like...
And invades Canada, or tries to.
Things must just never change.
It's the ring. I mean, it's like the Lord of the Rings is an allegory for... And so the amazing thing that you have coming as a consequence because of the War of 1812 and this invasion of Canada, you have soldiers in the New England states using nullification to refuse to enforce draft quotas and to refuse to invade. Yeah. And you had civil disobedience on behalf of the militia saying, I was signed up to defend the state of Vermont. I am not setting foot across the border into Canada. Crazy.
That's great.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That's funny. Even so far back, there's just examples of hypocrisy in presidents.
Yeah. And none of them are perfect,
Yeah.
And you like to think they are. Maybe even Jefferson, who's my favorite founding father. But with the War of 1812, you had essentially those states, they were crippled by Thomas Jefferson's tariffs that preceded the war because there was all these raiding going on. The British it was open season on American shipping.
Yeah.
And so Thomas Jefferson was like, oh, how do we stop this? Oh, I know. Let's do this tariff, guys.
So people won't try to trade elsewhere, right? I'm assuming.
So no one will trade with us. That's how we're going to solve our ships being raided. And actually the New England colonies, who were mainly into the trading, they merchants, they liked the fact that their ships were being raided because then they could jack up the profits because it was a risk.
Oh yeah, I bet.
And so you have the New England states right away, old Federalist bastions of what we talked about from episode 2. They are being really mad at Thomas Jefferson and using nullification to try and fight against... They're using his own principles to try and...
Yeah.
And so then you get the Hartford Convention, which was the first secession movement, one of the first, preceding the Southern Secession Movement. And they were going to secede, if not for the ending of the War of 1812.
Yeah.
So, or they were very seriously talking about it. Yeah.
I remember hearing that only very briefly.
Yeah.
And it wasn't something that was ever... I don't recall the importance... I don't recall nullification being talked of so much in my high school.
Oh, and it was such a foundational principle of our early republic, essentially. And another thing about the start... I'm sorry, I'm hogging the mic.
That's fine.
But another cool thing about the War of 1812, or funny, is that the declaration of war for the War of 1812... I could look up here... So the Declaration of War came on June 1st, 1812. James Madison this is Wikipedia, sent a message to Congress recounting American grievances against Great Britain, though not specifically calling for a declaration of war. In any event, it came, but the declaration, because of the delay in communication times, I don't know if it was a tariff or there was a certain Great Britain was opening raiding, and that was the main reason for war. Well, it was taken away a day before the declaration of war came. Yeah. So the main justification for the war was removed, but it happened anyways. Yeah. And so that was a funny little anecdote from history. So in talking about the War of 1812 and all these the little nuances of history, Madison's quote, which I threw out a bit earlier, is that liberty is threatened by these dangers, real or imagined, from abroad.
Yeah.
Well, I think in talking about war, one of the main things that you need to talk about or mention is that fighting war and promoting peace is one of the most important parts of the liberty movement, because the justifications for war or war is followed by a huge enhancement in the state.
Yes.
A growth of the state. Yeah. And I know that Ron Paul talks about this all the time. In his view, the most important issue is foreign policy, because if you look at everything that's happened in the last, history of the Republic.
I would agree. Yeah, I do think it's the most important issue as a libertarian, but unfortunately it's also the one that I would say we have the least control over, since it is something that's decided at the executive level.
Yeah.
But
should be decided at the congressional level.
Yeah.
But
but that's been a while.
Yeah.
So.
Or even if it's decided at the executive level, it's decided in the rings within rings of the deep state.
Yeah.
And all those decisions happening behind all the interests. But
Kissinger,
Henry Kissinger and his cronies.
Rothschild. Anyway, yeah, no, I do think it's one of the most important topics, because I think out of everything the state does, killing people is by far the worst thing it can do.
Yeah.
It's terrible the amount of lost productivity there is within countries. But
let's unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
The lost productivity and some of the economic theories behind it.
Yeah. Actually, this is we'll take only half a step away from war, but there is this idea that I know this is something that Paul Krugman has talked about before. That war is something that this is a Keynesian theory that, since stimulating demand will increase the economy, it will be good. It'll make people produce more things. Everyone will be happier. And a great way to increase demand is to go to war, and it's to build a whole bunch of tanks and planes and uniforms and firearms and those sort of things.
And human capital.
Yeah, and within the process of having all this money going into a military, like the economy and the world, the country as a whole will become better. That is absolutely false.
Mm-hmm. Broken window fallacy.
Yeah, absolutely. So to start off, money going towards a military does not, especially in an egregious and aggressive one like ours, does not increase the capital of anyone at home.
Well, it's the inherent difference within the seen and the unseen, essentially. Is that what you see? Okay, so someone's saying that, war increases productivity, the GDP, all that stuff.
Yes. Yeah, this is a great way to talk about it.
Yeah. What you see is the money being funneled into the Raytheons and the military industrial complex.
You see people being employed by them, but what you don't see is the money that would be in people's hands if it wasn't taken through taxation or inflation, that's used to create other businesses and create other wealth. Mm-hmm. that is actually usable by the population of a country and not by its leaders.
Yeah, and having it go directly to be obliterated. For instance, the strike in Syria.
Yeah.
And how that is, how much was it? It was like
67 million?
Yeah, a million per rocket.
It was in millions.
And that's gone. That's just gone in the blink of an eye. And what you don't see is where this capital and assets where it would have been placed if it had been left in the economy, say, and the reason why it's unseen is because you can't measure it. It's immeasurable because in certain instances it'd be so small.
Yeah. 1.59 million.
Yeah, one per missile?
Per missile.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they used 59 of them.
Yeah.
To kill 80 people.
Yeah. And I mean, they didn't hit anything, essentially. I mean,
anything important.
Yeah. And so it was, I guess, even in any event, like a diplomatic show of force.
Yeah.
then but back to the economics of it. If you it's immeasurable, because when all these people, all these individual actors acting within the economy, if each of them, had a little bit extra to divert, maybe invest in a business or
buy that one extra thing that one extra widget that they need.
Yeah.
It's all something that is very hard to witness, while the people being employed by Raytheon it's very easy to witness.
Mm-hmm. And we call it the broken window fallacy because of Frederic Bastiat, the very famous political philosopher from the 1800s.
Yeah, and the broken window fallacy is, well, there's kind of like a story that goes along with it, that someone throws a window through it. Someone throws a brick through a window, and there's a bunch of people commenting on it, and one person saying that, like, oh, this is good for the economy because now the glacier is going to be employed to make this new window, and that's that's increasing demand. But that's what you don't see is the fact that the shop owner was going to purchase something else, that was going to possibly be something that increases, purchase some capital instead of just maintaining their business or something like that. And it's kind of like the idea that I think that the real lesson from the broken window fallacy is that just creating demand is not worthwhile. What's important is the creation is the ability to create more wealth. I guess it's like an increase in supply. I would, if we're going to supply and demand, what's more important is people being able to put money to increase supply in the economy, like to invest in capital, than it is to just generate demand blindly, because that money can go to means with no end. It would be, if every window was broken in a city, like, there's going to be a lot of glaciers paid, but there's going to be a lot of money that is not going to other things. There may be people put out of work because of that.
Yeah, and I think Peter Schiff explained this well. There's a video which I'll put in the show notes where Peter Schiff he goes to an Occupy Wall Street rally.
Yeah,
and I think it was through Reason TV. Who did the filming, but he goes to an Occupy Wall Street rally, and he's holding a sign that says, "I am the 1%.
Yeah, I've seen that. It's great.
It's great. But he makes the analogy of comparing the economy to a household. And who would you expect to be more profitable? Someone who saves their money and invests it and keeps using capital to expand their assets, or someone who's spendthrifty and just throws money all over the place?
Yeah.
And is that analogy applicable here?
I think so.
I think so.
When criticizing the Keynesian obsession with demand.
Yeah. And with spending.
Yeah, with spending, yeah.
So, yeah, that analogy fits, I think. So if you think of the United States as a spendthrift who's, we're throwing our weight around overseas, albeit these Fortune 500 companies are capturing all these assets too.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that they're growing the economy. It's just benefiting a certain select people by leeching from the others.
Oh yeah, there's no way to say that the overall that the U.S. economy is doing better because of the use of violence overseas. Although in some cases there may be a point to be made for that, but it absolutely is not worth the cost in human life in any way, shape, or form, I think.
And let's really elaborate that.
It's absolutely immoral to conduct an invasion or an aggressive war. A defensive war, that's something that we can get into later. Mm-hmm. But being an aggressor, going to another country and, we're going to... You don't have democracy here. You don't have the kind of government we like.
Let us help you.
Let us bomb you into freedom and bomb you into having a democratic government. It's absolutely absurd. Because a lot of times those regimes are actually are doing, the country as a whole is doing better before it is meddled with by the United States.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at pictures of Iraq in the 60s.
Yeah.
And how, like, everything is clean. People aren't going around wearing burqas even. Like, the women in classrooms, they're not all... this is controversial.
They're I'm assuming they're dressed in more Western clothes.
And they're not all...
covered up.
Yeah, covered up, but what I mean is... I want to say subjugated, but, like, they're...
More liberated?
They're more liberated, I guess.
Yeah.
They're just not as oppressed. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah. And absolutely, these regimes have done terrible things, and that's not okay. But things are not better because we bombed them and put a puppet government in there.
Yeah.
So, and in no way are the terrible human rights violations that are done by, let's say, like someone like Gaddafi are good or acceptable or something that we think should happen, but it's far better than destabilizing their country.
Yeah, and installing the puppet, but also leaving it susceptible to extremist groups.
Yeah.
But the first step is making sure that these atrocities actually happened and were committed, in fact, by whomever we're trying to overthrow.
I mean, recently we had this Syrian gas attack, which was there was no evidence behind the official story in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, obvious false flag. And even so, the last gas attack that happened, if people remember, in 2015, I believe.
I actually think it was 13.
Was it 13? Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
13, and everyone was in an uproar about it, rightly so. In the sense that they didn't want to go into Syria.
Yeah.
And Obama was trying to bring us into Syria.
Yeah.
And there was a kind of a grassroots effort there.
Yeah, one of the few examples from my life that has given me hope when it comes to achieving freedom in our lifetime was seeing that in 2013 that the United States did not go to Syria, because there was just a huge public outcry of just like it was really surprising me, because like at least where I was working at the time, politics weren't something really brought up, and it was in the middle of the Midwest, so people in general are pretty conservative there, but there was just a lot of people like in the break room just casually talking about like, oh, I don't want to go to Syria, that's a bad idea, we've done, we don't need to go to war with another country. And I was just like, wow, like there's so many people here who just don't, like regular people who don't want to blow up another country in the Middle East, and this is great. And it seemed to actually, I don't know, maybe there's something going on behind the scenes that we just can't know about, but it really seemed to me at that time that public opinion was what stopped that from happening, and that was so encouraging.
Mm-hmm. What I was going to say is, after the fact, I think even the UN Rights Council came out and said, Assad didn't do this gas
absolutely
attack.
It was,
and they were saying he did at the beginning.
It was one of those like there are weapons of mass destruction, kind of moments where something that I see nowadays, like when people are baying for war and the things that they're saying, like the justifications that they're using nowadays, they aren't even ones that seem to be true. Because it's a lot of times it's like they're based off of these. Lately they've seemed to be based off of false flags.
Yeah, and Ron Paul was talking about, or was it the justification for going into, was it Iran or Iraq? Way back when was like these babies being murdered in a crib, and it turns out the whole thing was just a put on production that was literally faked. Like, did you hear about
no,
that?
I haven't.
Okay, I'll try and search that out for the show notes too.
Yeah.
I'm really cutting out work for myself in the editing process here, but I'll get there. But yeah, I really think there is a lot of hope when it comes to the anti-war movement. I mean, especially, maybe you disagree with me.
I disagree, actually. I mean, 2013 seemed like a pretty big exception. The reason why I don't have a lot of hope for the anti-war movement is because of Barack Obama.
Yeah.
And, like 2008 onward.
Yeah.
When there was like an incredibly large anti-war movement, and I grew up in a libertarian family, in a liberal community, and like anti-war was like a really big deal. Like that was something that we talked about a lot, and how it was really bad that we were attacking people in the Middle East. And then Obama became a president, and then everyone shut up.
Yeah.
No one on the left seemed to care anymore. And that, like, later when looking back, it's so appalling.
Their silence now.
Yeah, their silence is so appalling. I have a bias for sure, but I get significantly more pissed off at people complaining about Trump right now, because all those people are people who were apologists for Obama's wars.
Yes. Yeah.
And now they're just like, oh, look, Trump did something bad. And it's like, were you even fucking paying attention for 8 years?
Yeah.
Like,
okay, well,
end of a rant.
No,
Sorry.
no. But let me try and push back, at least from my perspective, because I agree with everything you just said. And maybe I would walk it back a little bit, but I'm having cautiously optimistic hope, because my parents, because I grew up conservative, as we discussed, I think in episode 0. So go back and listen to that. But I grew up conservative, and my parents, I think, went along with Bush when he was like, okay, we've been attacked, false flag, September 11th.
Mm-hmm. Which, in case anyone forgot, Bush ran as a anti-war conservative. Just something that I think is something that I have forgotten about. Yeah. And which is just sort of, you see trends throughout presidencies.
Yes, the anti-war candidate getting elected and becoming war. Obama was the anti-war candidate. Trump was the anti-war candidate.
Bush was the anti-war candidate.
And I talked to them about the sarin gas false flag.
Yeah.
And they seemed to agree with me, and they seemed like they thought it was a bad idea. And from a general sense, hearing what they've said over the past few years, being, just pretty normal people,
using them as like a surrogate for like the general, like the average conservative. Yeah, you've seen them become more anti-war.
Yeah. And actually, incidentally, this podcast, since I talked to them, this podcast is in an effort to, I know they might listen to this, but it's in an effort so that I won't rant at them as much, and so I can do it on a mic now. But I really do see that in the conservative community, and I'd say that my parents would be pretty mainline conservative, and they're not anti-gay marriage. They're just pretty normal people, and I see them as being like the mainline conservatives.
My parents I would consider to be pretty average liberals, maybe a little bit on the more liberal side. Being like, I know, being hippies and that sort of thing. Not really, but coming from that area, that community of thought, and all I've heard is just apathy about wars with Obama, and now I'm hearing a little bit, nowhere close to what there was when Bush was around, when it complaining about Trump. Mm-hmm. But what I hear a lot more than people complaining about Trump's foreign policy is people saying things like, I'm not sure if Trump can actually read. Like, I saw this I saw this really convincing article about it. I'm not sure if Trump can read or not.
That's so bizarre.
And like, I watched it and I'm like, yeah, sure, maybe. But this is a bit of my bias coming out against people who are apologists for Obama. But I'm just like, I don't care. Like, I don't care if he can read or not. All I care if he does or does not blow up people in the Middle East, or if he does or does not enact beneficial healthcare reform, which it seems like that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And
well, but then again, there's the whole illusion of the thought that Trump actually influences these things personally, or is it an illusion?
So we can't be too sure, but it seemed pretty obvious that there was a change of heart in Trump, and that either he succumbed to the power of the ring, as you've described before, or it was that he got into a situation where the powers that shouldn't be, as Corbett likes to describe them, made him do their wishes. Made him enact the policy that they want. And I can't read his mind, but I think it's probably more so that he was put in a position where he had to follow the kind of policies that we've been seeing for the past 12 years.
Yeah.
Or
at least
16 at least.
Yeah.
Hawkish foreign policy, increasing, greater welfare state at home.
They're all the same. And that no matter who you pick, you always get Jeb Bush. And I can't, that's from Tom Woods.
Yeah.
But whoever you pick, you get Jeb Bush. And that's so right. I mean, but if you look back at, Trump is he's an enigma, because everyone's trying to figure out what he is, who he really is. And there was a quote from, he was on a talk show in the 90s or the 2000s saying, like, if I ever ran for president, I would run as a Republican because people who watch Fox News are the stupidest, like, most gullible people ever.
Yeah.
And so I don't think he's not a Republican. I don't think.
No, not at all.
He is Trump. He's not a politician. He's Trump. He, in my opinion, he's looking out for his own interests, and I think maybe he wants to do good.
Yeah.
I think, like,
but I don't think either he is, either he's been tricked into thinking that good is what has been done for quite a long time, or that he is now no longer interested in doing good, or is unable to because of actions of the deep state or whatnot.
Yeah. I guess maybe I should try and stray away from trying to, because so many people have done the whole let's dissect Trump thing, or they are trying to. I've heard a million people say, okay, this is what Trump is actually thinking, and the theories behind that, and they're all wrong.
Yeah,
usually.
There's no way to. No one is a mind reader.
Yeah.
And we're just speculating here for, I guess you would say, our amusement.
Yeah. But another interesting thought that I just had was, like, so how they're always calling the World War II generation the greatest generation.
Yeah.
I think that was Tom Brokaw. It was either Tom Brokaw or someone labeled them the greatest generation. And my thought is, like, could you imagine today's millennials fighting a world war? Like, on the scale of World War II?
So I actually think yes.
Yeah.
And so, but the reason why is that I think that people rise to a challenge. And so I think that if there was like a World War III sort of thing that didn't end in just immediate nuclear holocaust, that people would rise to the occasion. I have a lot more
faith in humanity,
faith in the human spirit and will, and every generation has shit on the generation that comes after it. Every single one has. That is, it's just old people not liking younger people to them. And
I get that, but I despise millennials. I am one, and I can't stand our culture.
Maybe it's more of a contrarian streak in me, but I'm like very indifferent, and I put a lot of effort into combating this anti-millennial kind of thought.
Oh no, are we finding something to disagree about?
Finally.
Okay.
How many minutes did it take? It's every generation is shit on the generation before.
That's true.
And after it, excuse me. And even nowadays, and the other way is true, because we were like, oh, the baby boomers, they just took a whole bunch of fucking welfare and now they destroyed the country. Things are terrible because of them.
That's true.
Yeah, but we still have that narrative in our culture as well. There is very much like a counter millennials are bad narrative out there.
I'd agree with both. We're all bad. We're all terrible, I guess, would be so I hate people.
Yeah.
Like, I like individuals, I don't like people.
Oh yeah, and I very much understand that.
Yeah, and so maybe my hatred for millennials comes from my experience at the University of Minnesota, which is a socialist indoctrination camp. Or, I mean, I say socialist, but it's a progressive indoctrination camp.
Yeah.
And so I have a lot of disdain from lots of extended subjection to this. So that's where I'm coming from.
What I'm thinking of is, at least in my experience and from what I've seen of people around me, is that when given a significant enough challenge and dire consequences, people will rise to it. People don't lay over and die. And I think that's something that is innate to any animal, is the will and desire to survive. And this is pure speculation here. I have no way am in any way qualified to what I'm going to talk about next, but I personally really suspect that depression and a lot of mental illness that we see nowadays in Western cultures is because of the luxury that we live in. And that isn't to say that, that's not saying that we need to get rid of luxury because of that. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I would rather be depressed and not running from animals than be terrified for my life.
You anarcho-primitivist. You can't be on our show anymore. So the Liberty Weekly podcast no longer has a co-host.
Oh, no. So, I don't think it's a good, I would rather have luxury and wealth, but I admit I don't have enough evidence or research or even anecdotes to go off of this.
Yeah.
But saying when I say the human spirit, that sounds very lofty and idealist, but I think it's the urge that all animals have to procreate, reproduce, and overcome adversity, that I think is what would lead us to be able to not get completely curb stomped in another world war.
Yeah. Or maybe the amusement I have with that thought is trying to imagine today's hipsters being drafted. And I guess maybe they did in the 70s or in Vietnam.
Yeah, I mean,
you got the same kind of situation, perhaps.
I think there's just a great scene in Apocalypse Now where there's just some guy, it's been such a long time that I've seen it, but there's someone who's just really, really high. He's on some kind of drug, heroin or thing or something like that, and he's just in a trench and just shooting his gun into the air, and I think that's a really bizarre image of something that probably was very common. Was a lot of you're getting hippies who are drafted who are used to using a lot of mind-altering substances and bringing them into Vietnam, and then being armed and in a situation they really don't want to be in. Yeah. I just think that's such a bizarre image. I'm going to make another case for my perspective.
The millennial spirit.
The not the millennial spirit, the spirit of animals, of all living creatures.
I'm trying to make this sound as lame as possible as an ad hominem.
But anything that exists nowadays has gone through thousands and thousands and thousands of years of adversity, of having poor nutrition, predators, lack of shelter. And any animal, the bunnies running around in your backyard, they're in a survival situation. It is legitimately their life or death for them, and that is something that we have the luxury of not needing to experience anymore. But it's something that our entire lineage for millennia, for millions of years. I don't know if it's actually millions. I don't know enough about the time scales and evolution. Yeah. But every single being along that chain that comes up to you has cared about living. It has cared about making babies, and that are successful, that can make their own babies. Yeah. And everyone around me is in the same way. Everyone before them, except maybe the last couple of generations, but has faced adversity and has overcome it because the desire to live and reproduce was stronger than the adversity. And so that's why I think that if bombs start dropping, people will get their shit together.
You're right. Okay. Yes. I agree with that. But there's such a certain sense of sorrow associated with that. When you're talking about the greatest generation and you're talking about, and like, I know there's people within our movement that condemn veterans as being maybe they make kind of a collectivist argument. Like, you're going overseas, you're the Empire's legionnaires, you're the stormtroopers, you know? And I think they're just played. Everyone is played.
Yeah, that's what I would say. I would say I'm sympathetic. It's I definitely think there are people that go to war to be able to be part of the biggest gang, or to be able to enact cruel things on other people.
Yeah.
And I also think there are people that go to war because they think it's virtuous and they've been tricked into thinking that. And
or they want to help people. Yeah, I'd say I do. I have sympathy for them, and I want them to be taken care of. Not in a governmental sense, but I want them to not be broken in this mill, this gyrating mill of just flesh. And I'm gonna get Alex Jones right now and just talk about that, but you know what I mean.
War is a meat grinder, and it's the people that come out of it still alive. It's really terrible, the state that they can be in, and I wish that everything that they can be in the best health possible. And I absolutely don't think that the VA is a way to do it.
Oh, no, not at all.
Yeah.
That was a poor choice of words on my part. but I think, so we're experiencing right now this rising case of PTSD, and it really started with the Vietnam War. It's soldiers, and I think in a sense that maybe it was more prevalent than World War II, and it might have been because we just knew about it.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things going on. I think a big one is an increase in diagnosis. So it's not necessarily that there is more of it; it's that there's more awareness of it. More people are because there's been terms for this. There's shell shock, or there's a couple more in between shell shock and post-traumatic stress disorder, but ones that are getting increasingly more technical and clean, and in human words, well, before something like shell shock is a lot more visceral, which I just think that's a neat something that's interesting to see, is that now we use a very tame word to describe this situation, but there's a couple other things I've heard that people have theorized that because there is less of a time, there is people who have just been in conflict, people who are returning from war, spend less time with each other than they used to, because before it was you're going to spend a couple weeks on a ship together. That's something that I've heard. I don't know
and you're raised in the same unit, you're trained in the same unit. A lot of parts are taken from, like, a lot of people come from the same towns, and I don't recall which war they began changing that. It might have been Vietnam.
I wouldn't surprise me if they ran to a situation where they couldn't get enough people to have
from one similar cohesive unit,
because it absolutely makes sense to have people come from similar regions of the world, because they'd have such a stronger sense of camaraderie.
Well, what I was going to push back on, though, was I think that this would be the case for PTSD growing in the instances that we see it, okay? What I think is that as the wars are becoming more and more blatantly unjust, that you are getting, it might be because of that, in my own postulation here, as you're getting wars that are more overtly unjust, and as you are getting more instances of soldiers being conditioned to kill, because humans have an innate, and I wanted to do a whole episode about this. But if you read Lieutenant Dale Grossman's book, On Killing, it's called. It's the psychological impact of soldiers in combat learning to kill, and I'll link to it in the show notes page. But we have an inherently humans are against killing their own kind. And it's a very strong impulse. And just to briefly go over this is in World War II, they did this study, and they polled all across all theaters, all American infantrymen to see how much they fired their weapons in combat. Only 1 out of every 5 soldiers said that they took part of in any instance where there was an exchange of fire. Only 1 out of every 5 soldiers reported that they discharged their weapons at all, like at all.
Yeah.
And you get it all throughout history in this book, lines it all up. And it just goes to show that, we don't like killing each other. I was just reading in the fight or flight response doesn't apply to humans in combat, because usually fight or flight, there's fight or flight.
Yeah.
Well, when you're fighting your own kind, there's fight or flight or posturing or submission. Okay? And a lot of what fighting is when we fight each other, it's posturing.
Oh, yeah, I totally believe that.
Yeah, because we're trying to, scare or intimidate.
Yeah, well, if you look at any mating ritual that's done by any mammal, and the intent is not to kill at all. The intent is to display dominance.
Yeah.
Which is something that definitely happens within humans. It's just a lot more, there's many more ways that we can do that, and it's, veiled in a lot more ways. And so the army, of course, noticed this, or the armed forces. They noticed that only 1 out of 5 soldiers would fire in any given instance. So what did they do? Well, they worked on it. And so Vietnam was the first war where we see conditioning when it comes to getting soldiers to perform their duty. Yeah. And if you watch Marine Corps training videos, they do, whatever they're doing, and they're always chanting, kill, kill, kill. And it's seriously on that level is conditioning. Yeah. And
Vietnam is one of the first wars where they employed these strategies, and they have now gotten the fire rate up to in the high 90%. And so my argument would be that we're getting these soldiers that are killing, and they're doing it because they're conditioned to kill, and they're struggling with it.
Yeah, they're struggling with like the moral consequence, like the fact that they have done evil.
Yes, and they know it.
Yeah,
they know it on an innately human level, and it's heavy.
Yeah,
and it's hard to say because I want to have a certain respect for veterans, because I'm concerned with respect for, even though I think statism is a religion, and that that the government is, plays on that, and all of our patriotic rituals with flags and all that is just status worship.
Yeah.
But I really see soldiers as the core victims here.
They're the greatest victims, aside from all the innocent people and civilians that they end up killing overseas. And you can see that in some of the Iraq veterans against the war winter soldier testimonies, of which Adam Kokesh kind of joined the freedom movement because of that. And some of those testimonies can be quite shocking in terms of the brutality with which we treat, the Iraqi people and the people whom we're occupying.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. They have, for sure, in many situations, have been manipulated the most, have been they've had more rights violated than anyone else is in the society, because when you join the military, you're signing a slave contract. You can't just leave. There's no choice to exit. You either have to be like dishonorably discharged or discharged in some other way if you want to, but you can't just decide not to come back.
Yeah.
You're actually like hunted. down, like that sounds a little bit extreme, but it's like the people from your company are going out to find you, and bring you back to war.
Yeah. And in a lot of ways, I view our veterans as the most noble party to this whole sick charade that is war, and I guess maybe they have, they're individuals and they each have their own, but I've always kind of seen soldiers as being, maybe they're not perfect, but from my innocent point of view, seeing them as being this noble force. And maybe that's part of the whole conditioning,
Yeah.
Feel free to push back.
I don't feel that way, at least nowhere nearly as strongly. Again, the word I use is sympathy.
Yeah.
Because it's terrible. Many people were tricked into believing that they were doing something good. Many of them could have been very noble people, but I'm not going to deify them. That's something that I personally try to avoid.
Well, I always try and think of like, okay, what if I was in their position, and I considered briefly joining the military.
Same here, very, very briefly.
Yeah.
It would be a drone pilot. That was my plan. If I was going to do something, it would be a drone pilot. So I would be like the least actual military you could possibly do.
Yeah.
And this is sorry, I'm getting away from what you're trying to say, but drone pilots also get PTSD.
Oh, really?
Yeah. No, because there's such an incredible amount of stress put on them, and they understand that there's someone's life in their hands. It's like when I choose to fire or not, like I am killing someone or not, and I could be wrong, because collateral damage is very, very common when it comes to drone strikes. And that was something that I learned about and really surprised me, but at the same time made sense. And I'm very glad that I never joined the Air Force.
Well, in the PTSD too comes from a fear of letting your friends down, and I think that's where it comes from, is the grief and guilt of having killed, but also being afraid to let your buddies die and to let them down, and that's just soul crushingly sad to me. But I briefly considered joining the Marine Corps, and I'm glad that I didn't. But I'm just thinking of it from the point of view of your average kid that wants to join the armed forces. I think they're high pressured into it in certain instances.
The recruiters are salespeople. They're high pressure salespeople.
But if we're talking about killing in a very general sense, and this is kind of what I've gotten from the book, is that talking about killing and not having killed is like being a virgin and talking about sex. And
within the
context of the military, or anyone talking about killing, and killing someone else is an overtly intimate, very kind of sexualized thing, if you want to get all Freudian. But it's intimate in that sense, and in the sense that you can you'll never know what it's like until you've done it.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think of soldiers who sign up to go to war, right? And maybe why I wouldn't blame them as much is because you have no clue what it's like. You don't know what you're getting into. You think maybe you're doing good. Everyone around you tells you, like, yes, you are defending freedom.
Yeah.
You're doing all this, So they're tricked in that sense, but at the same time, it's not real to them. Like the reality of going out and I'm going to have a rifle in my hands and kill a person that, I've never seen before in my life. It's just a thought. Does that make them less morally culpable? I don't know. But I think we could maybe understand it,
Yeah.
Or try to. Yeah.
I'm gonna say I would still say sympathize.
But
steadfast
maybe,
in my opinion.
I've articulated it. I've articulated my position, and I guess I would agree that sympathize is the right word.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't exonerate veterans. I have a great deal of respect for them, but sympathy too.
Yeah, and at the same time, like I wouldn't Like, if I saw a veteran, I wouldn't go up to him and be like, hey, you did something wrong. Like, I'm not going to be a dick to them, but...
I guess I wouldn't really know who our listenership is, you know, in the sense of... Not that I would change my opinion based on that, but I guess...
I know that the worship of the armed forces is something that is... that's a bit of a biased way to put it.
Well, it's a razor's edge that you walk, you know, because at least for me, because I want to show respect, you know, for the real sacrifices that people have made, but also condemning the reasons why they were made and saying it was unnecessary.
Yeah. And maybe I'm being insensitive to those sacrifices, which is entirely possible.
But I guess what I'm saying is that for someone who subjectively buys into everything and really does believe, it's tragic.
Yeah.
And I guess sympathy would be the right word.
Yeah.
But a complete lack of understanding, lack of empathy, because like I said before, if you're a virgin talking about sex or someone who's never killed talking about someone who has, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I guess that would be my position. But I can still say that war is immoral.
Yeah.
So, so in talking about war, there's one thing that's always thrown around is how much money we spend and how much more money we spend than everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely.
And with no results, you know, because we've been in Afghanistan now it's the longest conflict in U.S. history.
Longer than the Vietnam War.
Yeah, and actually longer than World War I, World War II, and the Civil War combined. And there's no plans for it to be over. And it's just the war is meant to be continuous, you know.
To get a little Orwellian.
Yeah, a little Orwellian. It's, you know, a human face being stamped on forever. Yeah. But, and then, and we were talking off the mic before the show about how much pollution is caused by governmental agencies. But if you think there have been thousands of atomic bombs dropped throughout our history since the atomic age.
Yeah, and testing.
Yeah, and I mean, that can't be good.
Yeah, no, it probably isn't the best for air quality, things like that. And not to mention other things like the use of Agent Orange in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Or the, I'm sure, significant amount of gasoline and diesel that are needed to use that's used to run all of the military's equipment does quite a bit to pollute the environment.
And and then there's also like the medical testing that was done, like with LSD. They dosed soldiers way back in the day with LSD without their consent. There was actually Supreme Court cases about that, and it's just ridiculous.
So bizarre.
Yeah. But another thing that we wanted to talk about was the use of depleted uranium in Syria and Iraq and how dangerous that can be, and the hypocrisy of decrying the sarin gas attack while we ourselves have used depleted uranium on civilians and throughout the Middle East, and the significant health concerns associated with the use of depleted uranium. I know we were discussing this article on antiwar.com, written by Daniel McAdams, talking about the U.S.'s admitted use of depleted uranium, even though they had lied about it and said they weren't using it in Syria. But now it comes out, and this is an article entitled "The Cancer of War, U.S. Depleted Uranium Use in Syria," and it's dated February 18th, 2017. Of course, we'll link this on the show notes page. But Daniel McAdams writes about the U.S. and its use of depleted uranium, saying that they've admitted, U.S. Central Command spokesman Major Josh Jacques told Air Wars and Foreign Policy that 5,265 armor-piercing 30-millimeter rounds containing depleted uranium were shot from Air Force A-10 fixed-wing aircraft on November 16th and November 22nd, 2015, destroying about 350 vehicles in Syria's eastern desert. So it's just crazy. You know, we're using chemical weapons, but decrying the use of chemical weapons. It's kind of like the Orwellian double truth or double think.
Double think, yeah. Or you are what you claim to decry.
Yeah, essentially. But another thing that I wanted to touch on was what I said earlier about veterans, just kind of clarifying that, like, I think the whole state worship of veterans is a problem, but it's like the cruelest kind of manipulation, because you get people to support veterans, especially on the right, and you're playing with those feelings there.
Yeah, you're getting the populace to you're getting the population as a whole to participate in the propaganda that encourages people to join the military whenever they participate in in veteran worship.
Yeah.
Or soldier worship.
Yeah. And that's not something that I support. I was saying that, if we're going to send these people off to fight and die for a cause, the least we can do is make sure that they're okay when they get back, Yeah.
Yeah.
But having respect for veterans, doesn't mean that I necessarily support veteran worship throughout our society. Yeah, it's very nuanced. So where do we even go from here?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
This was something that I was looking up beforehand because I want to get the details straight because I think it's a really interesting story.
Okay, let's dive into that.
There's something called let me just make sure I get the title right. So there was I'm gonna give an example of the egregious waste of our military here. There's something called the Millennium Challenge 2002. This I heard about before I was an anarchist, and I thought it was a real neat story. And it was funny because I remembered it again after I became an anarchist, and I was like, wow, like that makes so much sense now. But what it was a war game conducted by the United States Armed Forces in 2002. And to be clear, like, a war game is something that it's not something people are playing on a board in a hobby shop. In this case, it's something that's done with computer simulations and live fire exercises to create a simulation of combat and of a war between two forces. And in this Millennium Challenge, the two forces were blue and red. Blue was obviously supposed to be the United States, and red was supposed to represent a Middle Eastern country. I'm not really sure which, but that it clearly was like a pseudo Iran or Iraq, and there was a really clever ex-lieutenant who was put in charge of. Lieutenant General, who was put in charge of the red team. His name was Paul K. Van Ripper. Like, damn.
That's brutal.
Yeah. And in this fight this war game was supposed to demonstrate the immense power and prowess of our new highly technological military. But what ended up happening was that our military surrogate just got completely stomped and was just like utterly destroyed by Van Winkle's red force. So in like the first few days of the simulation, the first few simulated days, I think it was within like the first 2 days, I believe there was the Blues Navy, so representing the United States Navy, had in the tens of ships had been sunk by Red's forces using wily tactics like massive cruise missiles and suicide boats and things like that. And after basically being wrecked, they blue team being wrecked, the United States being wrecked, they just restarted the war game over because they're like, well, it's just going to be a waste if we don't use the rest of it, if we don't continue this exercise.
And if blue doesn't win, it'll be a waste.
Yeah. and after this restart, both sides followed scripts, and basically Van Ripper wasn't able to use any of his clever tactics or strategies that were specifically designed, like he was using them specifically to combat the blue team. And in effect, they just had like a show afterwards. It was not like after that reset, this war game didn't have any meaning anymore because there wasn't actually a challenge. It was just scripted so that blue would win. And this cost, let me bring this up real quick. This entire exercise, from which, if anything was learned, was how easy it would be to combat the United States military with someone who is very crafty. But that it didn't seem like that was learned from it, because afterwards it was just like, look at how great our army is after we won this combat exercise, after it had been scripted. But this entire thing cost $250 million in 2002 dollars.
Yeah, which is like what, $700 million with inflation?
I'm not entirely sure, but $250 million that went to absolutely nothing because no one learned a lesson from it. Besides this, the only thing you got out of it was this neat story. That's it.
Yeah, it sounds like it was what is that movie with? It's an 80s movie with a very famous person where he's basically, I think it's called War Games, where it's like who played Ferris Bueller? Come on, Matthew Broderick. Matthew Broderick's character is a video game enthusiast, and he gets recruited by the Air Force to play war games with Russia, and he ends up saving the world or something. You remember that?
No, I haven't watched it all, but it reminds me a lot of Ender's Game.
Yeah, okay. Well,
spoilers.
Oh no. Oh no. Well, we could.
If you should read that book, it's a good book.
Yeah, I should. I'll find this. The audience might know what I'm talking about, but I'll find it anyways and put it somewhere in the show notes, whether it's a trailer or whatever. But yeah. So real heavy topics today. I feel like so every time I'm going back and I'm editing the episode, it's terrible torture because I'm like, oh, I should have said that, or oh, that was wrong.
Yeah.
In a sense, or I just want to argue with myself. So that's the torture of editing, and maybe it's good that maybe you want to do it, or maybe you don't want to do it, because then you're gonna hate everything that you say.
Oh, I believe I would hate everything that I say.
I mean, especially editing episode 2 and talking about the Constitution. There was a part where I said anti-Republicans instead of anti-Federalists. I was thinking of Jeffersonian Republicans, and so I mixed, and I said it 3 times, and then and there was some constitutional nuances that I just glossed over or whatever, but it was so I think this is episode 3. We're getting ready to launch the podcast this weekend. Today is Friday. We're just recording it now, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the podcast and the experience that we've had so far with it. Maybe to relate to some people out there who might be thinking of starting their own podcast, maybe especially within the Tom Woods group. So we're figuring out this giveaway.
Yep.
I think that's going to be $20 Steam gift card or Amazon, depending on who wins and what they want. Mm-hmm. So we'll be doing that for a week after the launch here. We've had some trouble getting a logo together because the logo that I currently have had for about a year, it's not the right size to fit on iTunes. So I've been working with Fiverr, and I think I just picked the wrong vendor, but it's been a pretty poor experience so far, I would say. Someone who purports to be from the United States, who obviously is not, and we have some pretty comical looking logos that just look very unprofessional out of that experience. So, so we've had that experience with Fiverr, but at the same time, it's been a lot of fun just learning how to do this, I suppose. And so, how to structure the episodes and, how much prep work we want to put into it.
And getting comfortable on a mic too is something that it's interesting to feel that out.
Yeah. I think, but these are all good skills to have, I think. So, like, if nothing comes of this, at least I have the audio editing skills and all that kind of stuff too.
It'll sound kind of strange, but I'm glad that I have an excuse to have bought the audio equipment that I have.
Yeah.
Which sounds really silly, but in my heart of hearts, I'm a consumerist and I love having things.
Yeah.
And to me, it's really neat to have these microphones and stuff like that.
Yeah. And I had this mixer board that I bought when I was a sophomore in high school, and I recorded some very cringy, like, acoustic solo singer-songwriter songs, and I still have them buried in my computer somewhere. And so now we're using it here, and we're using it to monitor ourselves and facilitate this whole situation, the Liberty Weekly podcast. So we hope that you're enjoying it. We certainly want to grow, and we want to grow with you as the audience. So we're still figuring out how to structure these episodes. I figure that it's better in a conversational format, and then we'll have some... Well, and then we'll have some, some more serious episodes. So in growing the podcast, one of the most important things that we can get is your feedback.
Yeah, we absolutely want to. We're nothing without you, and we want to know what you want to hear from us, and so we can compare that with what we want to do, and we can come up with something that we'll be very passionate about, and that hopefully you'll enjoy.
Yes, and moreover, especially with the format of the podcast itself, whether you want more specific facts, that's something that we've been talking about.
Yeah, it's something that we haven't been able to come to a satisfactory conclusion on yet.
Yeah.
Whether or not we want to be more conversational or more structured, how researched do we want this to be?
Yeah, and issues like that.
So let us know.
And you can definitely give us feedback by emailing me at patrick.mcfarlane. Patrick McFarlane is MacFarlane at libertyweekly.net, and that will definitely be received. But that leads me to my final point, that the best way really to experience our podcast would be to sign up for that email list. That's where we're going to send you personalized content updates. It'll also get you a free copy of our ebook coming out, which is entitled Just Say No to Drug Prohibition. And so we hope you'll enjoy that. It's jam-packed full of a very in-depth public policy analysis of the war on drugs. We are planning still a war on drugs podcast, but realize that it might take a little bit more prep work. Just to make sure that it's real good.
It's such a huge topic.
Yeah, it's such a huge topic and one that's really important. So today, for today's podcast, we decided to talk about just war in general. And since it's pretty hot in the news, it's been pretty contentious here lately. So we thought we would touch on that. But going forward here, we're getting ready to launch that podcast. At this moment, we're planning on having weekly episodes. Hence Liberty Weekly, but that may change actually.
We may become Liberty Biweekly or Liberty Fortnight.
Yes, Liberty Fort. No, I want to stray from Liberty Fortnight, but that's a good. All right, everybody. Well, I think that's enough from us for today.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. We hope that you'll join us for episode 4, which should come out in a week and not a fortnight.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, everyone.